I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Yolo Transit District Board of Directors, and it's March 10th at 6:02 p.m. Can we have a roll call to establish that we have a quorum? City of Windsor's present. City of Woodland present. County of Yolo
Present.
UC Davis and Caltrans here. And absent is City of West Sacramento and City of Davis. All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna ask for if there's any changes on tonight's agenda. Okay, then I'll be looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
So seconded? Second. All right. First by Ferrick, second by Vega, and roll call, or no roll call vote. Let's do all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Opposed, none. All right, that was easy. Now we're gonna be on the public comment period. We're gonna have comments that are not on tonight's agenda and on the consent calendar. So as long as they're within the purview of Yolo Transit District, they are more than welcome. And we will have a 3-minute clock. Public comment in person. All right, come on up.
Alan Furish.
Can't hear you.
Alan Furish, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you very
Al.
much. Again, express when a public makes a comment, that should be put on the public record, they're not in the minutes. I don't know why that's disrespectful of some of the members of the public rights. Gives a public comment, if no public comment comes to these meetings, I think that should be respectful, they should know what should be included in the statement should be there. And I know particularly, I have made comments multiple months now asking for information about the construction on 5080, and no information has been forthcoming. Last month, Caltrans didn't even show up, much less Caltrans never says anything, gives us any information. Hello? No one gives us any information about what's going on the freeway. I gather that the Caltrans is on again, off again, closing down Highway 50 eastbound in West Sacramento, which will cause tremendous disruption for people's lives in Davis. It's included weekday and Monday. That's not noticed anywhere. Noticed only the advice was changed. And I noticed this coming weekend that not only will Highway 50 be closed, but the Tower Bridge will be closed on Saturday and Sunday morning for 4 hours. It's gonna cause, I don't know what kind of havoc in West Sacramento. I don't understand why this hasn't been noticed and the public hasn't been considered. I noticed that we're closing it down for a charity, and the charity will raise $18,000 for the 10 hours closed of that bridge. That's the public good in exchange for losing the Tower Bridge. I wonder who's managing this thing, who's managing the public for the public good, not just the interest of a charity and the fleet. I know it's a fun run, but it's going to be tens of thousands of people, like 80,000 people go across the bridge each way in a given day. I also, in the public input phone number that you call in Yolo County, this is what's the message when you call. This is the message you get when you call in. This is the number you call when people give public input. This is what they get if they call.
Your call has been answered via IP office, extension 2819. Is not available.
Why I've commented on this thing in the past. Why is that voicemail message still not reflecting its input to the board? We can do better as a community. People need to trust it. You as electeds need to watch out for the commuters and the drivers. And sometimes staff is doing things for administrative convenience. You need to be advocates for us. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your service.
Do we have any other in-person public comment? Come on up. And thank you, Alan, for your comments. Good evening. Is this okay? Really perfect. Okay, it's me, I think.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members. My name is Dale Somersill, and I'm a senior associate for California Consulting, the state's largest grant writing firm. I'm a resident of Yolo County, and as some of you know, I've also been a longtime staff person for municipal agencies, including my latest tenure with the city of Davis. I was the Parks and Community Services Director and the Grants Administrator. When I was working for the city of Davis, I was the lead for numerous grants over the years, which were for key programs in city infrastructure. Califran Consulting has been in existence for over 21 years, and our grant writers have written over 1,600 applications that have been funded for our clients. Our team has brought in over $1.6 billion to our clients for a variety of programs and projects. Califran Consulting has contracts with more than 130 public agencies across the state and for grant writing services and reporting services. Our clients include the City of Davis, Winters Unified School District, Yolo County, Vacaville, and Vallejo. As you all know, with the current changing and uncertainty of economic times, it is imperative to look at various types of funding sources and to try and bridge monies that you have for various projects and programs. Obviously, leveraging your monies and seeking grants is consistent with your vision statement, core values being efficient, innovative, and responsible steward of public funds, and consistent with district-wide priorities and fundraising to deliver a suite full of transportation projects and programs to the communities that you serve. I will leave some information with your administrative staff, and please do not hesitate to contact me if you'd like to be of service to you. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Dale. Is there any other in-person public comment? Is there any online public comment? No public comment online. We just received written public comment. Okay, we'll be reading the written with item 5. Is that right? We just received a general written public comment. Later on, I'll just identify the comments to the items. Okay, thank you very much. I just want to add that we welcome public comments, but we are not able to answer any of the public comment content that isn't agendized. It is in the purview of our executive director. If there's something small that can be responded to, but other than that, we can't respond to public comment. We might not look, might look just like we're in listening, but that's because we can't say anything. So I hope that helps. With that, we'll close the public comment period and move to the consent calendar. Are there any changes or comments that, oh, did we do that on the consent calendar? No, okay.
Sorry, what was your last?
It was the consent calendar.
I have a question on an item on the consent calendar.
Director Ferris.
Yeah, just, I mean, happy to, just an item on the STIP funding coordination item, that's for item 4C. Happy to ask the question now or not, but just, yes, so I'm, so appreciate the update. This is just the continuation to sort of some of the discussions we've had over a number of months now. One of the updates is that the UC Davis population was subtracted from the countywide total, as UC Davis is not a SACOG member. That I understand that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't impacts from the 14,000 students population that are living on campus and don't just stay on campus. They leave in their vehicles on county roads all the time, or city roads all the time, so City of Davis roads. So I mean, I understand not wanting to, according to the staff report, not wanting to inequitably skew funding percentages towards Yolo County, understand that, but how do we account for the 14,000 people that are now apparently not a part of Yolo County, even though they do live in Yolo County? So I'm curious about that. Thanks.
As I don't know if I have a satisfactory answer for you specifically related to that, there was a general recognition that because the formula that we use.
I don't mean to interrupt
Sorry,
you,
was
but I think if we're gonna discuss the item, we need to pull it for discussion.
Oh, okay.
Is that,
If it's a brief.
if it's just one brief answer, but if it's a full discussion, I would want to move it.
Great, I'm happy to have it pulled then.
Okay,
If you- I mean, but I mean, if you want to respond now, or we can wait till later, it's fine, but just happy to pull it for a little
Okay,
more of a discussion.
why don't we move it to right before item 5. So it'll just be pulled after 4.
That sounds good.
Any other comments for the consent calendar or questions?
I'm happy to move the consent calendar items A, B, and D.
We have a motion by Director Ferricks and a second by Lauren. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. We're now gonna move to discussing the item that's item 4C, SACOG STIP funding coordination with YoloTD member agencies update.
Yeah, so in response to the question, it's a good question. What do you do with those 14,000 people? So we were up against trying to figure out what we would do with them. By default, those 14,000 came from Yolo County's population and the California Department of Finance's financial projections. And so, you know, as you noted in the staff report, if we eliminate them, then they would by default go back to Yolo County. That would give Yolo County, a higher percentage of the STIP funding. So the alternative would be to try to come up with some sort of, equitable equation that might give some of that to the city, some to West Sacramento, because, those 14,000 students or residents are potentially committing and traveling elsewhere in the county. And the simplest, it really was just the simplest solution was to pull them out of the denominator for the population. And also, since the university isn't a SACOG member, they don't have eligibility for the road miles portion of it either. So that's sort of where we landed as a group and didn't raise any real questions amongst the TAC in Yolo County TAC.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So there is still, I think, or at least it looks like there's still a potential percentage going to Unitrans, is that correct? I mean, at least according to the chart.
Yes, that's correct. And actually,
Which, I mean, serves students,
Right,
including
so-
many of the students who are no longer included as part of the Yolo County's population, but might still be on the campus.
right, and when you look at it through that lens, the amount that Unitrans is assigned in the sub-allocation calculator is actually the same amount that UC Davis. It's 6% in prior iterations of the calculator, so there wasn't really a fundamental change in how much the sort of campus community is being assigned.
So, what local jurisdictions gained percentage due to Yolo County losing percentage?
It was spread throughout, so the total county population was essentially reduced by what, 7,000? 14,000 people.
Yeah.
And so that was just spread across, it's just the denominator, so none of the city's populations changed, none of the city's road miles changed, it's just the county's population ended up being reduced by that much.
All right, thanks, appreciate that.
Are there any other questions on the item that's before?
Has
five?
SACOG board voted on this yet, or is that the next step, I guess? What's the next step of this? I mean, this is just an
Transportation board.
advisory for us, obviously, but
I think the transportation board has voted on it, but it goes to SACOG on the third Thursday of the month.
Yes, that's right. I know the transportation committee has approved the SACOG guidelines. What we're doing here at the county level doesn't require SACOG board approval.
yeah, I guess fundamentally I have a challenge with the sort of, whether it's just on paper or not, sort of, suggesting that 14,000 people who live on the campus are not somehow real or exist. I mean, many of whom are students. That's already a group that is consistently, underrepresented in a variety of ways. I completely understand that the county is not responsible for roads on the campus. So, or nor is the city, for example. So totally understand that. But again, people are going to and from the campus, not just staying contained within the campus. So they're utilizing, whether on a bus or in single use cars, single passenger cars, or trips on, via all the county roads and or the city roads that are adjacent to the campus. So it just feels odd to me that would be, I mean, I guess the other question, is how much more was the county supposed to receive if the student population is included in the county population? I mean, is it 10% more, 1% more, like just?
I don't have the number right offhand, I can get back to you on that, but given that the 14,000 is a small percentage of the total countywide population, and then the calculator is a function of equally weighted between population and road miles, it's not a significant amount of funding.
I guess, thank you, okay, I appreciate that. I guess the other, honestly, one of the other challenges that I have with it is just that it, according to the staff report, it says after conversations with UC Davis, the city of Davis, and Unitrans, nowhere was the county consulted in this, UC Davis was removed from the calculator, so I mean, it just, that seems a little frustrating as well, that, and maybe the county was part of those conversations, but it does seem I thought they were part of the TAC, but so it just seems a little, yeah, that doesn't seem like it would be a normal procedure or process, so just curious about that.
So the issue was how to handle the university, Unitrans, and the cities. That was why those three, because in prior iterations, Unitrans and UC Davis were both grouped together as a single sort of entity. And the city Davis was also an individual entity. And so what we were trying to do was figure out, did it make sense to group them all together? Should Unitrans be separated from the university? And so that was the context of that conversation, and we sort of worked that out between those three organizations. And then, so that conversation, once we figured out how they wanted to be handled, then we kind of figured out, okay, what does that mean for the calculator? And we came back to the TAC with the results of that. And of course, Yolo County representative participated in that meeting and didn't express any concerns about it.
Thank you.
Are there any other discussion from this item? I would be accepting public comment on this item, if there's anybody that's here in the room that wants to make comment. Is there? Come on up, Alan.
Thank you for raising that, Lucas. I agree, there's something wrong here. It's like, if you have a car, you get benefits, but if you don't, with roads, but if you bicycle or whatnot, and you go short distance, this formula seems to subsidize the bad behavior, which is driving, and basically undercut the good behavior, which is using alternate modes. Something's amiss here. Thank you for raising this, Lucas.
Was there any discussion of quote unquote splitting the baby, like amongst the UC Davis, Unitrans, and Davis in the county?
No, I mean, the total funding didn't change, right?
Okay.
And the amount of funding that stayed on campus was roughly the same, so there wasn't really determined to be a need, or what even raised this conversation within the TAC that there was something inequitable occurring, because the 6% that the university was getting before is now simply assigned to Unitrans as an individual entity.
Thank you. If there is no more discussion, I would ask for a motion to approve the 4C item, STIP funding coordination with YoloTD member agencies. At least to accept it.
I think just to clarify, I know the box was checked by action, but it's actually set for information because the STIP MOU is not done, so it's.
Okay, so it's information only?
In April.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad. I did feel a little uncomfortable. Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're gonna move to the regular calendar. We're gonna go to item number 5. We will be closing the public hearing and approving, or the staff recommendation is to approve proposed service changes for Beeline Microtransit and Knights Landing, Yolo, and Winners. And we'll be presenting this item. Yay! All right. Please.
My name is Cassandra Barrientos, and I'm the Assistant Transportation Planner here at Yolo Transportation District. And as mentioned, I'm going to be coming back to you guys tonight to approve the proposed service changes for the Beeline Microtransit service in Knights Landing, Yolo, and Winters. Just to refresh your guys' memory on the service history, in August of 2019, Your Ride Microtransit launched in Knights Landing. In March of 2020, the 220 and 220C fixed route that serviced Winters was discontinued due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But that same month, Your Ride Microtransit launched in Winters. In September of 2023, Your Ride was
Can I
rebranded.
just interrupt you that it was put in Winners as a pilot? There's a pilot program. Thank you.
In September of 2023, Your Ride was rebranded as Beeline, making it easier for people to book rides on their mobile device and by calling in up to 7 days in advance. In July of 2024, the community of Yolo was added to the Knights Landing service zone. So last month, we opened up the 30-day public comment period here at our board meeting. And a week ago, on March 3rd, we had the Citizens Advisory Committee where we presented to them on the proposed service changes. And in the past 30 days, we have done our public comment period where we launched an online survey where we got 90 responses within 2 weeks. We also had in-person outreach at the Yolo food banks in the community of Yolo, Winters, and Knights Landing, where we found it to be very important to go out there and conduct in-person surveys, as we did about probably 20 of them in person when we were at Knights Landing, majority of them being in Spanish. So it was very helpful to go and inform the community about the ongoing proposed changes. We also posted on our social media and our website of the proposed changes and announcing about our survey. And we also had announcements made in Winters on the city manager's update and in the Winters Express. We posted flyers in the 3 service zones at popular Beeline destinations and at local businesses. And we also had in-app promotion where we had an alert letting riders know about the ongoing proposal. So, like I mentioned, over the course of 2 weeks, we had an online survey that had 10 questions and it received 90 responses, which was very important as we have a small team of 3 of us going out there to get the public's input. As a start, we asked where these respondents lived, with the majority of the responses being 29 from Woodland, which could be due to Woodland being our busiest service zone. Shortly followed by the community of Winters with 26 responses, Knights Landing with 21, and Yolo with 5, and other areas such as Davis and Robbins with 9 responses. We found that there was a strong support for longer service hours, with 33 responses saying that they wanted an earlier morning service and a later evening service. We also noted that nearly all of the Knights Landing respondents said that they would like to see service on Saturdays in the Knights Landing service zone, and 19 respondents preferred service on Sundays in Winters. In the survey, we informed respondents that we were considering expanding the service hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday in Winters, and 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday and Sunday in the Knights Landing and Yolo service zone. An overwhelming amount, about 80%, voted that the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. schedule would work well for them for the Beeline Microtransit service. We also had a question that allowed people to write in their preferred service start time and end time in the winters zone. Out of those responses, 21 out of 23 respondents from the winters community stated that they were okay with the service starting later, 7 a.m. or later. There was only 2 responses that stated starting at 6 a.m. When asked about when they would like the service to end, 14 out of the 23 winters respondents said that they would be fine with the service ending at 7 p.m. In Knights Landing, they were also asked the same question, where 24 out of the 26 respondents from Knights Landing and Yolo were in favor of the service starting at 7 a.m. or later. And with the service starting, ending before 7 p.m., there was a 73% positive rate. Some of the public comment themes that we noticed was that there was positive support for an earlier start time and a later end of service time in both the Knights Landing, Yolo, and Winters service zone. We also noted that the longer service hours would encourage more riders to use the Beeline microtransit service. We also noted that Knights Landing residents would like to add the Beeline microtransit service on Saturdays. At the Citizens Advisory Committee last week, we got a unanimous support for the service change proposal, but we also noted that they suggested improving strategies of grouping travel times to make it more convenient for people traveling to inner city. So if someone's traveling from Winters to Davis, it'd be best to have a specific start time to make it easier for grouping and to be able to accommodate more riders on one trip. The Citizens Advisory Committee members also suggested restoring Route 220 or 220C to better serve our inner city commuters. Here we have our proposal, which is the same as the meeting from last month, where we have no changes, and we plan on extending the service 1.5 hours in the morning and 1.5 hours in the evening from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the Knights Landing and Yolo service zone. For the winter proposed service changes, we also had no changes from last month's meeting, where we are proposing service from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, but we would have an additional vehicle from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. to meet those peak demand periods and be able to serve more riders.
And then this is the estimated cost of proposed service that we had at the last meeting. Number store file.
We added a slide here to talk about the restoration of fixed route service in Winters, which was a subject of much discussion at this board last month, as well as with our Citizens Advisory Committee. So I wanted to just share a bit more context about that. So of course, Director Lauren, as you noted, the Beeline, the microtransit service was introduced as a pilot and as part of our last short range transit plan, our comprehensive operations assessment YOLO Go. The recommendation was to replace the fixed route service with microtransit. What we know is that microtransit does perform better than fixed route for shorter non-commute trips. And that's part of, but that YOLO Go was adopted in 2021 and we were still in the middle of COVID. And the priority was really on not a lot of people that were commuting. The campus was closed, right? And so the focus was really on lifeline transit service for people, for example, in El Rio Villa, people who don't have a great way to get across 505 to the grocery store, to all the other destinations in winter. So we know that microtransit works quite well for those sorts of trips. However, it's no longer COVID. We have a lot of people commuting, and we know that fixed route works better than microtransit for those intercity commute trips. And I think a lot of the challenges we've had with the Beeline service have been related to such a large service area, stretching all the way from Vacaville to Davis, being served with just one on-demand vehicle. So those are the trade-offs we have between microtransit and fixed route that we want to balance. We're currently preparing our short-range transit plan and comprehensive operations assessment, our new one. It's expected to be completed at the end of 2025, and one of the focus areas for that is looking at where we've been using microtransit, where we're using fixed route, and whether or not we need to change some of those, change the balance, if you will, between microtransit and fixed route in communities like Winters. Implementation is expected in fiscal year 26-27. And while we're in the midst of that process, this expansion does offer a near-term solution to address the unmet demand that we see right now. But it is not a replacement for fixed route service. But our recommendation is to move this forward now so that we're able to address it in the near term while we are looking at figuring out what the future correct balance of microtransit and fixed route is for the community of Winters.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the extra time of adding slides and, really looking into it. Would there be a discussion from the dais, or shall we go to public comment first? Discussion? All right. Is there public comment in person? Alan Hirsch.
Thank you. This was well researched and the public outreach was very good. That's appreciation, but you're giving away $12 lift rides for $2. Of course, it's gonna be popular. People want more of it. I think you guys should be asking for these reports, there should be cost effectiveness numbers, which I don't see here. I think that's important. We're talking about a fiscal cliff or something like that. I don't see any discipline here. It's hard to take away something, you give it away, especially when it's free. I'm quite concerned about that. I want to appreciate again the robust discussion about fixed route versus last time, which Lucas, I think, stimulated. That's very good. I encourage that going ahead. I don't see in this plan any benchmarks, see whether it's success or not. If we're adding incremental service, are they incrementally the same cost effective or are they less cost effective? I don't see any benchmark. I don't see any checkup points. I don't see any follow-ups. And in terms of the costs, the costs are only direct costs. There are overhead for managing this thing. I don't see that included in here. We have a planner who spent, I hope she's paid very well. But I don't see those costs in here too. So I think when we take something out, we should fully cost it and we should have benchmarks and we should cost effectiveness. I mean, this obviously just makes sense to move ahead, but I think next go around, we can do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else that's here in the room? All right, we do have a number of public comments that have come in, and Janine will present them.
I don't read them.
Does she read them? No.
She doesn't need to read them. The comments that have come in, the written public comments are available on a packet to the public, and there's a set at the back of the room as well.
Okay. Yeah, there were some that came in, later than the packet, and it's really nice that so many people are so interested in us getting it right. And it is a little bit tricky to get it right, as our planners know. So I would be then asking for discussion on the dais.
I have a question about the timeline here on page 90 of our packet. So if through the due diligence of looking at bringing back the restoring the fixed route service in addition to the Beeline in Winters, should that be the decision? Am I reading this correctly that the soonest that the community would see that implemented would be in February of 2026?
That would actually be the adoption of the short range transit plan and the implementation plan. The soonest would be more like July of 2026. Whether we would make any changes. And this was not your question, but I should clarify that given our budget constraints, it's unlikely that we would bring back restore fixed route service in addition to this level of expanded Beeline. We would be looking at how much do we reduce Beeline and how much do we bring back fixed route within the budget constraints that we have.
Thank you.
That was a really good question. Thank you. Appreciate it. Director Ferris, did you wanna? All right.
A couple of things, we'll appreciate the updated staff report and all the outreach that's been done. I think I have a couple of questions that I have to do with just the RideCo app. I know there was some discussion at the last meeting about the sort of the issues of, I think the app. Something around the lines of not counting riders that board with other riders. There's some sort of, and that I think the app does have that capability, I think, or maybe that's just not been a service that's been utilized since sort of the launch of the line. So I just would like to ask about that and hear sort of from staff if there's an ability to do that. I think that's because I think some of the conversation we had was around, one person boarding, taking it to a destination and then it's empty, essentially coming back. But there may be multiple riders that are, attempting to utilize or board at the same time. Sounds a little bit like a fixed route service, but so just curious about that as one item. I think definitely have some thoughts and just questions around the fixed route process. I mean, I completely understand the sort of the timing of the sort of short range transit plan and having to go through that process to determine sort of what might be desired by various parts of the county and cities within the county in terms of transit usage and routes and such. So that I appreciate that. I think there's I think there has been at least one exception to the current short range transit plan around, sort of reinstituting service that was discontinued. So fixed route services continued. So, it's not without precedent to do that. But I do appreciate also, I would say another quick item just as so there's that original question about the RideCo app. I think the issues around, fundamentally, of course, to support microtransit. I think that's important. I think there is also, it's not just a one size fits all situation. And we've had a variety of comments from members of the public about the costs and like individual rides and such. I think, I think there's definitely sort of a need for, we're not gonna necessarily have a fixed route service everywhere. So for example, like the town of Yolo, right? We may not have, we'll see how many rides we end up getting. But I think that's an example where like using the innovation of a fixed or of a microtransit service, I think makes some sense. And yes, they're not cheap rides, but I think also there's some like reasons for doing it. I mean, the same I think is also true for Knight's Landing, of course. Whereas I think that the city of Winters might be large enough in terms of a massive population that the need to go back to sort of a fixed route service makes a lot of sense. So just sort of, I think there's an ability to have, sort of distinguish between, it's again, not the one size fits all sort of approach in terms of micro transit. Clearly, the larger the population or sort of more density, like it seems like that's probably going to be one of the sort of biggest bang for the bucks we're gonna have, like, beeline operations in Woodland as an example, like it's within the city limits and it's kind of just they're going around all over the place. That makes a lot of sense. It also seems like I know there, and at least in the past, there has been some discussion of some of the fixed route services and not necessarily which ones make sense and which ones don't. So I know there is definitely, like, we'll just state it again for, there is definitely interest in the city of Winters to have fixed route service restored. I think the sort of the lack of the canceling the fixed route service due to lack of ridership was absolutely due to the pandemic. I mean, not for a lack of interest of people who want to utilize fixed route service. So, and I think we've seen that even look at a bunch of the comments from Winters as well, from people from Winters, and like clearly there's an interest there. So just a few sets of comments. I think the other question, so again, the first question around the RideCo app, the second question is actually about what are we doing around the penalties potentially around like people who are chronically like booking rides and then canceling rides, therefore kind of gumming up the system for other potential riders. Like that was raised at our last meeting, but as part of the discussion and the presentation at the end and then the discussion. But I think we absolutely need to be moving towards like figuring out some sort of like not harsh penalties, but like people can't just book a ride consistently and then cancel that ride. And then it basically screws up the system for everyone else who wants to potentially be a rider. So I don't know what that next step is there, but I mean, I hope we remedy that, like in short order. I mean, I think like the trying to, it's one thing to potentially expand this service, but if we're just gonna expand this service tonight and not remedy that other piece of the sort of problem, frankly, or challenge, I mean, it seems like, that seems kind of silly, because it seems like we're just continuing, even with additional vehicles, we're still setting ourselves up for the potential of, one or more people kind of abusing the system. So just those are kind of a couple questions that I have, again, around the RideCo app and sort of how you deal with that with regard to the groups of riders that want to ride. When it's only sort of registering one person, and then also this issue of the sort of we'll say penalties around for cancellations and such, so.
Thank you. If I may.
Go ahead.
I'll jump in or I'll start, and then Daisy or Cassandra, feel free to jump in. Thank you for all those questions and comments. Yeah, a couple of things about the RideCo app. There are some things that the RideCo app just inherently doesn't do great. And I think some of it is long distance, like this very large service area, I think is just fundamentally a challenge. And I think it speaks to, that microtransit doesn't work well in all situations. However, there are certain things about the RideCo app, and it's part of the reason that we selected it in the first place. There's some functionalities that I think can better support having better utilization of our vehicles. And one of those is around having set destination or set trip times leaving Winters and potentially leaving Davis. Like, so if we had two vehicles in the morning at rush hour, we could have, one leaving Davis and one leaving Winters at the same time. And then riders who are looking for a trip around that particular window, so let's call it 8 o'clock in the morning, would be directed to, this is the time when the trip is leaving, your community. And so that is a feature that is a differentiator for RideCo, and we haven't used it yet, but it's something that we are looking at implementing to help potentially as part of this service change. The other piece that you mentioned, Director Ferris, is the cancellation policy. So we've had a very lax cancellation policy, particularly as we're launching this service and wanted to encourage people to try it. We didn't want it to be overly punitive, but now that we're seeing how popular the service is, we can start to introduce some penalties to limit the number of cancellations that someone can make, say, in a week or a month, for example. And then after that, there would either be like, they just are no longer allowed to book rides, or they would actually have to pay for the cost of that trip. So those are two of the things that we're looking at in terms of policy changes. Those would be changes to our microtransit rider policies, and so they would need to come to the board for approval. So we're looking at doing that sometime in the next couple of months, probably as a consent calendar item, because there's so much going on. But we need to, so that's, I believe, the next step for our team. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I think you covered all the bases, but yeah, ultimately, we do recognize that our policies do need to be updated. Essentially, kind of what Autumn was mentioning was when we first launched the service, we wanted people to use it. It was something new, with the app that we had introduced. And so we didn't want to discourage folks, but now that we kind of have like that full first year under our belt, we understand like our rider behavior a little bit better. We know the needs of the community a little bit better, especially now that we've done so much outreach and planning in Winters. We kind of get that feel for what's actually going on, where people are traveling to, what are their travel modes. And then of course we have our bi-weekly meetings with the RideCo team. And so these are things that we're discussing, and our amazing transit team is also a part of those meetings. So they're not just RideCo's not just hearing the information from us, but they're also getting it firsthand from our drivers and our transit team. And so these are all things that we're aware of and we're working towards that. And so updating the policy was one of those things too, because we do recognize that there is some bad rider behavior out there, but there's also good riders out there too. So, we know that the service is getting very popular. And so we need to put things in place to kind of help our riders to continue having that great experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do agree with all of Lucas's comments and have some of my own. First, I wanted to say thank you for doing a deep dive, especially getting all the in-person comments and what did you say, 90 comments from winners? It was total comment, the top 9 total comments. That's a lot, and really appreciate it, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. when I read the packet and I have, heard from many people, their opinions, for me, I want to just go through some of the comments that are in here. And just, when I'm looking at these comments, the survey responses on page 92, and I'm gonna basically, highlight some from 92 and then 93. Some of them really apply towards fixed route. I will just give more stops that are familiar and even add benches to wait to be picked up. That sounds like a fixed route comment. Hard to know the time of the return trip, so it's harder to book in advance. Would seem like knowing it on a fixed route, right? I'm going down to about a little past the half. I often, oh no, I'm just gonna skip that one for later. Towards the bottom, increase vehicles for more departures. It would be great if the B line could stop in Davis. That'd be 220C, I think. It would be helpful, let's see, it would be super helpful if the bus stopped and picked up at actual bus stops instead of random buildings and landmarks. That seems like a fixed route comment. There are safe bus stops on my route, but they are not options to reserve. They are stops that do not deviate from the route I am on. And then that goes on. Fixed route. If I need to be somewhere at a particular time, there's no guarantee that a bus will be available for me to arrive in time. I think that's a fixed route. So, when I look at the comments, I'm trying to measure them and what is this one about and what is that one about? And who we're trying to serve the public. So those to me resonate with a fixed route need. And then some of them are ride co-oriented, and I think Lucas pretty much, or Director Frericks pretty much covered it, but it's also on 93 towards the top, make improvements to the app so it actually works, have more stops and longer time ranges available. Living in Winters is like living on an island with no way out of town without a car. Amen. When booking through the app, it would be helpful to see which time slots are available rather than just tying different times and hoping there's a bus available. To me, that's kind of in the middle between improving RideCo and having a fixed route. So I wanted to highlight those comments, just to show that even though this didn't look for comments on returning the 220 and 220C, I think that there's a loud voice that comes through many of the comments that highlight a need for something that is fixed and dependable. And then I wanted to go on. I support adopting the service changes that are in the packet. But I also really want to echo your comment about staging pickup and drop off to improve the intercity transfers. That's something I really I seek improving the RideCo app, but I really do want to restore the fixed route and the 220 and 220C. And I'm not sure how any of this would be measured. Like I think it was the comment about benchmarks. What are the benchmarks for this success? Not the financial benchmarks, but how are we rating that this is serving the community? What is our metric for success, or what is our metric for failure? Those are kind of my concerns. And I know everybody knows this, but Winters is kind of by itself, and it's 20-30 minutes in any direction to go anywhere. So whether it's a full bus or it's a microtransit, there's going to be deadheads. Hopefully we can do better with that, but I think it's just part of where it is. And as much as I would want to sometimes move Winters closer to a bigger city, it's not possible. We all know that. Mm-hmm. Those are my comments. Do you have any, would it be a future date to try to figure out what the benchmarks are for success?
Yeah, we can absolutely bring that back to you. Maybe when we come back with the policy changes that we talked about to the rider policies as far as the scheduled departure times and cancellation policy, we could also add to that, bringing back some benchmarks for success. We did adopt some benchmarks when we initially did the service, and some of that had to do with, for example, the ratings on the app, the user ratings on the app, and a few other things. But we can work on that and bring it back to you as part of that item. Does that work?
That's awesome. I do want to say that the Beeline is beautiful. People feel safe in it. They feel good when they get picked up in that beautiful shiny bus, microbus. And, you know, I can't say enough about how great that is for riders. So I really appreciate that. And I think that is a value to the community. But it seems like the community also values something that they know will be there so they could get to where they're going. Those are all my comments. Any other comments, or I'll be looking for a motion?
Sure, I have a comment. The clarifying question on the app, so I don't know, on Ride Code, you didn't call it grouping, but it was scheduling pickups and drop-offs. Did you say, can you make that change now, or is that what's required in the policy change for booking rides?
I believe I know for sure the cancellation, heading up the cancellations requires a change to the rider policies. I'm not sure what the other.
I don't believe so. I don't think we need to, that is something that we can do. Depending on how long it takes Redco to put it together on the back end, but we have tried like groupings in the past with night signing, because we did see similar issues where folks were all trying to park at the same time and then get to Woodland at the same time, and so we were able to tweak that relatively easily and implement it pretty much the next day. So, I mean, it's just a matter of connecting with our Redco project managers and, you know, letting them know, hey, like, we need to do this for winters or nights and or Woodland.
And then of course, letting the community know. 'Cause
Yeah.
Especially our regular riders, yeah.
Because, and to, Madam Vice Chair, to your point, just given where winters is, there are always going to be some empty seats perhaps. But this strategy sounds like we could mimic a fixed route if you group the trips and announce it to the community. It's just the smaller fixed route.
Mhm.
And the cute bus. I would just encourage that, just because again, as my question earlier, just around the time frame. I mean, I see the comments and I've heard and I've spent some time in winters, and if there's something that we can do now to meet the needs instead of waiting until summer of 2026, I would love to say, or to see that being done.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, we would need to work with our partners at Transdev as well to kind of see how we would schedule it, because I think right now, a deadhead that Vice Chair Lauren was talking about usually starts in Davis, just because it's a lot easier to get to Davis than it is to Rangers. And then, you know, we go and pick up folks, so it would just be a matter of also working with our Transdev partners and switching to see how that vehicle, if it starts in winters, if both those vehicles start in winters, to pick up as many people as possible. And then to kind of start dropping people off.
I really appreciate that. The staff recommendation says to start in spring, and I was just wondering if you could just give any more information about spring. It's spring lasts an hour.
Allergy season says otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, our goal is to roll out in late April. Of course, that's still contingent on the availability of drivers. We've been told that we should have the drivers by the time late spring rolls around. But that is our goal. We want to launch these new service hours, if approved tonight, in late April. Because we also need to give our contractor time to essentially like redo the drivers' bids or shifts. And that takes about 2 weeks.
Did anybody want to review the CAC's recommendations? I think you did cover that. the CAC was pretty strong about, bringing back the 220 and 220C. I think that was a unanimous support. I don't know.
Yeah, we have that on,
88.
yeah, and that's on slide 10. Do you want to bring slide 10 back then? Oh, slide 13. sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
they support all the, yeah, they support the changes. They are also raised the items that we've been talking about around grouping of trips during peak travel times, and then suggested there was restoration of the intercity fixed route service. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, I think not surprised necessarily that they
Yeah.
kind of came to the same conclusions there.
um,
So.
any other comments?
No. I would just say, great job with the outreach. After the last conversation, you did take into a lot of consideration what the board had discussed, and so I look forward to the short range transit plan as well. I appreciate the board comments.
Okay, so I'm happy to make a motion to approve the service changes to expand the service hours in Knights Landing, Yolo, and Winters. With service to be implemented in spring 2025, but I have a few additional items probably. So I would also just, so that's first part of the motion. Second part though has to do with, I think, staging pickups and drop-offs in a manner. So I'm happy to have, input on any of this, obviously, but staging pickups and drop-offs in a manner that improves sort of intercity ridership, between Davis and Winters. With specific pickups and drop off at sort of times. So I think that's just one item. I think seeking to improve the RideCo app to collect rider data when more than one rider boards the bus beyond the scheduled rider, and or provide available time slots to increase ease of use. I mean, if that makes sense, that's just sort of seems like what we've been talking about. And CAC and others have talked about, and staff. The other two items are just sort of, I'll leave it there, I think, for that, and with just sort of additional comment, this is maybe part of the motion or not, it doesn't have to be, but I think 2 points. One, updating rider policies to address the sort of, challenges with, I was gonna say abuse, but yeah, challenges with, usage, yeah, we'll just say, so anyway. And cancellation policies, that's what I'll say, so. That's one, and then the other is just like, obviously, and it's, whether the board is supportive or not, we'll see, but I just think, again, seeking to restore Route 220, sort of 220C and or C to serve intercity riders between, certainly between Winters and Davis, but via the short range transit plan. I mean, and then sort of being timely in assessment, delivery of that. And of that plan and sort of in reinstitution of service, so those are just like kind of add-on things that don't have to be part of the motion, but I think those, the staging, the pickup and drop-offs, the seeking to improve the app, those are the big items, I think, in addition to just sort of approval of the potential increased service, so.
I would second the motion, but I'd like to make a friendly amendment or so that also that YoloTD investigates a metric for success. And any other discussion? All right,
Does that sound, yes?
Did you get it all?
Yes, I'm writing, so yes.
I think I got it.
I think we have it, and sounds like we have the friendly amendment was accepted, so with that, I think we're ready for your motion.
All right, all in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you for your time on this. Everybody spent a lot of time on this. And, I think it shows that we value all of Yolo County, not one city over another, that all of our residents are important. And I appreciate that. All right, moving on to item number 6, the Woodland Transit Center security improvements and appointments and ad hoc committee, by Ryan. Thank you, Cassandra and Daisy.
Vice Chair Lauren, members of the board, item before you this evening, relates to the Woodland Transit Center, and so you can go to the next slide, please. The purpose here is to give you a brief update on developments over the past month with respect to the Woodland Transit Center, primarily on the February 18th Woodland City Council meeting, and also recommendations for next steps. Next slide, please. One slide, no. So if you recall, at the February 10th meeting, we shared with you an update on activities that had been occurring since between the previous board meeting in December through up until that February meeting. And we were primarily focused on conducting community outreach with a survey, doing a pop-up event, establishing a website to generate public support for the board affirmed location at Second and Court Street. Also at that meeting, we got one of the outcomes or takeaways that we had from that meeting was that, safety issues at the County Fair Mall were really high priority for this board. But also recognizing that ultimately the Woodland City Council did have discretionary authority over this relocation, and that if they chose not to support that we would need to be prepared to go back and look at additional sites. So on next slide, please. So on February 18th, Autumn and I went to the Woodlands City Council meeting. Autumn gave a strong presentation on background of the project, the process, the merits for Second and Court location, community feedback, all the same stuff that this board heard from us on February 10th. And so there was good discussion. The Woodland City Council was quite sympathetic to the conditions at the County Fair Mall and really supportive of trying to assisting in us being able to relocate out of there as soon as possible. But ultimately, they did accept a staff recommendation to determine that the Second and Court site was not a suitable location for our transit center. They also supported the staff recommendation to direct them to work with YoloTD to return with recommendations for mutually agreeable locations. Next step, or sorry, slide. And so that leads us sort of with, what do we do now? What are our next steps? So we're kind of back to a certain extent to ground zero. We learned a lot through this process, and we still have all the analysis of Second and Court Street does end up still being a viable location, or the Woodland City of Woodland decides that it that it is a good location relative to ones that we'll be looking at in this forthcoming process. So that isn't lost. We can easily pick that back up. But what we did come to a conclusion with, and was supported by City of Woodland staff, is establishing a 2x2 ad hoc committee between the Woodland City Council and the YoloTD board to sort of facilitate the process of moving forward and evaluating additional locations. We still want to focus on finding a location downtown because we think that's really important for the transit center. But we do think it'll help the process to have Woodland City Council members engaged regularly and making sure that we have buy-in at each milestone of the project before we proceed, so that we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves. We're expecting this to potentially take up to 6 months. That's about as long as we feel like we should need in order to get a sense of whether or not we're going to be able to come to an agreement on the location in the downtown. So we don't plan on spending another 18 months doing this like we did starting with this last process we completed. So that recommendation would be to establish the ad hoc committee on our side and to appoint 2 board members. The second recommendation is, if we're recognizing that we're really starting to look at new locations again, and spending, the time that's required to do that. It does mean that we're not leaving the county fair mall, within that, within that timeframe. So, we do recognize that there are challenges there, and one of our recommendations is to potentially contract with private security to assist with sort of perceptions of safety and sense of safety for our riders. There is private security that's hired on the other side of the mall, that we could potentially, leverage and, use for our needs as well. We also want to look into ways that we could potentially improve the lighting, and other, landscaping options and so forth. The property does have a new, property manager that Autumn has, been in contact with. He seems to be more receptive to, some of the concerns that we have about conditions at the county fair mall. So we're gonna, pursue as much as we can on that end as well. Next slide, please.
Just one point of clarification before we move on. Thank you, Kimberly, has pointed out that technically when we talk about one ad hoc committee, it's actually two ad hoc committees. So we would be creating an ad hoc committee, and then the city of Woodland would also be creating an ad hoc committee, and then those two ad hoc committees would talk to each other. Did I get that right?
Yes, so the recommendation, because we have one member who's on both, would be to have, it's technically gotta be one member. The council member from Woodlands, Councilmember Vega, and then one, person from each YoloTD's board and city council.
Yeah, and so, just a couple of, additional points that are worth mentioning regarding this process and how it relates to other processes that we're taking on. The first one is the short range transit plan. And, we feel like we have about 6 months to come to, a resolution on relocating the transit center. But that also kind of coincides with when we think we're gonna be, wrapping up the short range transit plan. So what the short range transit plan needs to be able to do is it either needs to assume a transit center location, because all the local routes and the inner city routes ideally are sort of converging in one location. And so if we know ahead of time what that location is going to be, then we can modify the routes and make our service recommendations around that assumption. If we don't know soon enough, then what will end up happening is potentially needing to site the transit center where we're assuming, any service changes and routes are going to be, so that the transit center, the available options for locating the transit center become more confined, because we're sort of establishing what we want our routes to look like in Woodland. So just wanted to point that out, that, we're sort of backing up against some time constraints, because we want to be able to finish up the short range transit plan, and we want to be able to finalize our assumptions on routing in Woodland. And then of less importance is we did learn that the agreement that we have with the county fair mall to use that property as our transit center does end in fiscal year 29-30. It's somewhat on the horizon, but if we're starting, if the 6-month process doesn't end up yielding the results that we want, and then we're starting to look at other locations or potentially off-street locations, then there's you can see all of the components that are required to actually do something like that. There is a lead time that's needed. Don't want to overemphasize that point, but just wanted to put that on your radar screen. And that should be the last slide. If there's any discussion, happy to answer any questions.
Is it more having clarifying questions for myself, for public comment?
Just one quick question. Just so on since it was raised, in terms of the agreement with the county fair mall, are there like some basic, in the contract, some basic standards of, care, maintenance, upkeep of the site that they are responsible for, or is that on us? And then I think the other part is just like, is there a termination clause in there? It's like, so appreciate any sort of additional information there.
I haven't looked at that in depth, have you?
I did look at it, and unfortunately, there isn't really a whole lot of leverage in that, in our agreement with them, that, compels them to certain expectations of upkeep. we're required to upkeep, you know, the transit center platform and the associated, you know, amenities, but beyond that, the agreement is silent on it largely.
And then, so then the item about termination clause.
That I don't recall, I need to go back and look at it, but I do think that there's, I mean, there usually, I can go back and look.
Yeah, I mean, just would assume that, have to assume that there's something in there about it, but the, yeah, okay, thanks, I appreciate that.
It's a really good question.
Just to clarify, I don't think that we're required to stay there through through 29/30, that, you know, we'll be able to leave when we need to.
Excellent. I'd like to open it up for public comment. Is there public comment on this item? Yeah, Hirsch?
Thank you. I was at the Woodland City Council meeting and there were basically mostly comments in favor of the downtown. But the council had already decided ahead of time. Your city manager who runs everything decided doesn't like transit. How do I know that? Go to the Gateway Mall and look for a bike. Can't find one. Go to where the bus stop is. It's as far away from the stores as it could possibly be. Go to the new Sprouts store just across the way. There are parking spaces for 4 bicycles. We're still in the 1950s in Woodland. Woodland still doesn't like poor people who people bicycle. People should own cars so they can get around. There's a social equity issue. And you recall Tom Scully came to the board at a second meeting. He wanted to take $150,000 away from the operating budget of this agency to pave streets for the bus stops. Because every other city pays for it, but Woodland should take money from the bus operations. We have this is what we have is really a political problem, not a technical problem. We can solve it with technical stuff, but there's a political problem here. Woodland basically doesn't like people who ride buses, poor people who ride bicycle. I think it's pretty obvious. You walk around and look at things. It's a wonderful city. Downtown, Davis should have such wonderful buildings, but we really haven't upgraded that for active transportation and transportation. So I think it's the citizens need to get involved and push on the council. That's the real thing that has to happen here. Because I just can't imagine why we don't have buses in downtown Woodland. What's that about? And oh, by the way, we approved you do the Tech and Ag Center in Woodland. You have a shared mobility, you have a transit center there because it was free to give the land away. But your staff didn't talk to Yolo Bus about whether they even wanted this transit center way down south. It's just no coordination of planning there. We should do better, and Woodland should do better to recognize the needs of all the people in Woodland, not just the people who have cars. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for your comments. Is there any online public comment? We have one online public comment. Okay, before we take the online, we have another in-person comment coming up.
Hello, my name is Alex Benavides. I work as an operator, but I'm speaking as a member of the public. I think a security guard or security personnel would go a long way, even if that's just one person there throughout the day. Recently visited the city of Seattle and used their transit system, and every other stop they had someone kind of show up and take off. And obviously there's not the resource for that here, but just the presence alone kind of makes a difference, kind of brings a little bit of sound mind. So something like if that would be implemented, maybe entertain having like maybe the first part of the day, which is really busy. And maybe the guard could be there for the part one, and then if possible, maybe part two, have them on board. Maybe later in the evening or later in the day. I think that just the presence alone would make everyone a little more comfortable in general. So I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate it. Any more in person? Okay. Should put our hand down now. See.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Chess.
Hi, how are you guys? Oh, you don't all have to answer. I was just actually raising my hand because I thought I heard Director Farrick ask about a maintenance clause in the County Fair Mall agreement, if I heard that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so there is language in the agreement that says that they have to do certain upkeep, emptying the garbage, cleaning the stops and a few other things, and that YoloTD would not pay them unless the work is done. And then as far as the termination, there is a 180-day prior notice on both sides of the agreement.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chess. Really appreciate it. So we're being asked to do two things tonight. One is to have somebody volunteer to be on the ad hoc, and two, to discuss the conditions. Should we take them individually? Do you think that's?
So for the second staff recommendation around, it's really directing staff to come back to you with a specific proposal. So we don't have a specific proposal for you right now in terms of private security, lighting, some of those other things, but with your direction, we will prepare that and bring that back to you for action. But so for the first recommendation with regard to the ad hoc, yes, it would be great if we could have that approved tonight so that we can, and the city of Woodland is planning to bring that, I want to say, to their March 18th city council meeting, I believe. So we'd like to get that established tonight so that we can then start planning the first meeting of that committee.
I am of the experience that when somebody's not here, you can volunteer them, but I know them and I don't want to face that wrath. So.
Josh doesn't fight.
Josh,
I'm happy to volunteer to serve on a 2x2 or ad hoc with Director Vega if the board so desires. And it definitely, in fact, oh, go ahead.
I second the motion.
Well, just on the other part, I mean, I think so it's one thing, I really appreciate the clarification just about the contract. I mean, I think of course, security option, I think is needed, and we should do that very soon, as soon as possible. I mean, I don't know that it maybe necessarily takes months to come back with a recommendation on that, or to put it into action. But I think that that's what I was asking about the maintenance item. I mean, and also, of course, the termination clause thing too, because I think we should be a little aggressive about this. I mean, try to. See how we can get some enforcement of the stipulations in the contract. I mean, if there is a responsibility from I know there's been some challenges with the mall management, or there's been some turnover and such, but I mean, if there is some sort of pieces of the contract that actually explicitly, refer to certain obligations by the property owner or the management, we should be, I think, trying to, seek to enforce that. So and then we, of course, have this 6 month, sort of 180-day, whatever, termination clause that potentially exists. And I think, I think we've not really maybe explored all those options. Not just not looking for a new location, but I mean clearly, at least there seems as though we don't have language in front of us, but that there may be something in the current contract that you can sort of point to that says, hey, you property owner are not sort of fulfilling your obligations, and sort of as it's laid out. So, I just feel like that's something we should also be doing. It's one thing it kind of falls within the sort of recommended act, or falls within the quickly improving conditions, but it's not explicitly called out. So I just think we should be taking a hard look at the contract and figuring out what we need to be, if there's anything we can enforce there or attempt to enforce there. So I mean, I think a move made, or there's a motion made. I think you made.
Yeah, you made the motion to volunteer to be on the ad hoc committee, and I seconded it. But before we voted, I just want to make a statement about the look of the county fair mall. What our police department talks about a lot is the broken window effect.
Yeah.
That once there's one thing, that it kind of opens the door to more. And that particular location embodies the broken window effect. And what I just don't want to see happen is for people to think that because our buses are there, it's any part due to us, which it is not. But if you aren't a transit rider and you don't have experience in, riding your bike and getting on all these other, great ways of transportation, one might assume those things. So I just wanted to, mention that on the dais. And with that, all in favor of the motion to have where it says Amia? All in favor? Oh, you had a comment?
Well, I was gonna say I'd like to volunteer to be on the ad hoc.
Oh, I thought that was,
I said that, I thought that was already.
Oh, yeah, I thought so too. I'm so sorry.
I accept that.
And do we need a second? Or did you? I seconded it, but you can, I can, okay. We, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, motion passes unanimously. And I'm so sorry that I didn't repeat your name on that. That was my, as they say, but bad. All right. All right, we're gonna move to item 7, which is an update of the YOLO 80 managed lanes project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to invite Jeff Nazarino, our consultant, to come and join us at the dais. We're grateful to Jeff for making the trek to be here with us tonight. And I think, Brian, you're going to start off and then we'll.
Yeah, I've got a few introductory remarks and then we'll turn it over to Jeff. Good evening again, Vice Chair Lauren, members of the board. Tonight we're giving you an update on the YOLO 80 managed lanes project. So we haven't brought this to the board, I think, since October, and at that time, the board had approved the agreement with Silicon Transportation Consultants to conduct tolling advanced planning, and that's what Jeff Nazarino is here with us. He's principal with Silicon Transportation Consultants. The staff report that you have in your packet provides an update on STC specific tasks and significant actions taken by the CARTA board to date, and it also includes a timeline for completion of STC's work. The staff report, though, is inherently sort of, generally looking in the rearview mirror of what we've done since October through today. But tonight, we wanted to have Jeff come to share with the board some of the key policy issues that YoloTD is working through with our regional tolling partners like Caltrans District 3, CARTA, SACOG, and so forth. So want to welcome Jeff to, oh yeah, and we also have Greg Long with us with Caltrans District 3, so can potentially answer questions on Caltrans behalf. But giving Jeff a warm welcome to our board meeting, and we'll turn the slides over to him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the board. Really just wanted to, as Brian said, give you a little bit of an update of the things that we're doing. So as part of the agenda, we'll go through the project overview, talking a little bit about the tasks at hand that we're focusing in on, as well as some very core focus areas that are pertinent to some of the decisions that this board will need to make in conjunction with CARTA for larger regional items that are going to need attention. Next slide, please. So just as a quick orientation, the project overview is a high occupancy toll, 3+ lane in each direction on the I-80 between Solano, Yolo, and Sacramento counties. We received that awards at Silicon Transportation Consultants in October. Have been working on the project since. Total contract value of $1.77 million. The project includes 8 tasks, and I'll go over those tasks in the next slides. So the first 2 tasks are a project management overview and process mapping. Really, these 2 tasks are a coordination between Caltrans, CARTA, and YOLO, making sure that we're looking at all of the work at hand in conjunction with regional and individual goals. Part of that is a master schedule and a policy matrix to kind of keep track of those individual items that need attention. At the bottom of this slide is a general timeline of the work at hand, and there's a lot of work involved. We've hit the ground running. We've taken a lot of the tasks concurrently because as we go through this presentation, you'll see that a lot of items need concurrent attention. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made, a lot of decisions that need to be discussed early on in the process, because some of these decisions that are made are going to have impacts for some of those long-term items that we need to focus in on. Next slide, please. One of the key tasks that we're working on is the development of the roadside request for proposals. This RFP is really the meat and potatoes of how we're going to get the toll technology for the YoloTD corridor. So within this RFP, we're going to look at the different options that we have for tolling. Things that you'll see in neighboring areas like Fast Track, things that we need to look at for coordination with Caltrans for facility design, for some of the limitations that we may have, physical space on the roadway conditions. So this RFP is a long process. There's decisions again that need to be made. There's policies that need to be coordinated. And there's coordination with Caltrans that needs to happen. Caltrans has gotten in front of the project to keep us moving forward with an award to a contractor to do the roadway construction. And part of that work was done early to make sure that we can obligate the infra grant funding that was received to make sure that that money can be spent, that that project can move forward. So Caltrans has done a great job doing the facility design for what needs to go on the roadway. And on the RFP side, we need to play a little bit of catch up. Typically for a toll program, we would have a toll vendor on board to help make some of those decisions on how the facility gets designed, the type of equipment mix that needs to go in. But Caltrans had to stay in front of this to make sure that that money was obligated. And so now we're playing a little bit of catch up with Caltrans in concert to make sure that their design that's being put in is going to match up with the RFP that we're working. Next slide. Another one of our key tasks is a traffic and revenue analysis. Caltrans did the initial traffic and revenue analysis at project start off, but this level 2 traffic and revenue analysis is really a more detailed dive. This is the opportunity to really look at the traffic, really look at the revenue, and to figure out what the trade-offs are going to be. It's an opportunity to help inform things like what the toll rate should be, taking a look at what the traffic is like, figuring out how you can positively change traffic time reliability, travel throughput, congestion management. All of that information is going to be informed with the traffic and revenue analysis, along with financial projections that will ultimately be used by CARTA to figure out how much operations and maintenance funding that they will have as the CARTA organization gets stood up. So this is a key task that we'll be focusing in on, and the work is underway for that. Next slide. In addition, we've got a task for community outreach and engagement. This is an umbrella task to make sure that any of the individual activities that we have within our scope have support for community outreach and engagement. As we talk about some of the other tasks like equity and TDM development, this is kind of our backbone, and this is our team that's going to help do that public outreach, make sure that we get stakeholder engagement and that we're communicating with the public as far as what's going on with the project. So this is one of those threads that weave through every task that we have. Next slide. As part of the services, we're also utilizing Kirk Trost, who many of you may know, to provide legal services as needed. Kirk's been a valuable resource through the life of this project to provide that ad hoc and specialty legal support, and he continues to support us to this day. Next slide. One of our other tasks is the Transportation Demand Management Organizational Assessment, the TDM assessment. Part of this project includes significant VMT mitigation, vehicle miles traveled mitigation efforts through voluntary trip reduction program. So that's really the TDM and figuring out how we can leverage the TDM to come up with these VMT goals. One of the issues at hand is that the current TDM program with Yolo Commute isn't really scaled up for the type of work that we'll have and the type of funding that may be coming through with the VMT mitigation from the toll revenues. So the work that we're doing is to take a look at the existing TDM structure, looking at best practices throughout the country, and making recommendations through a toolkit that we will be providing to YoloTD and to Yolo Commute for various options that they can have to implement and scale up the TDM programs across the board. Next slide. In addition, we're supporting YoloTD with a project-specific equity study. Part is looking at doing an equity study on a regional level, but what we're really focusing in on are those equity issues that are important to the county. So this is really a ground-up approach to take a look at those equity issues to figure out what's going to be fair for the commuting public. And using that as a framework for a larger coordination with CARTA as their equity study comes on board from a regional perspective. What we're doing is that balancing act of what is important to Yolo County and making sure that those programs are equitable and fair for the YoloTD project, as well as link some of that framework in coordination with CARTA as they figure out how equity gets scaled up regionally when the other corridors come on board. Next slide. So now for the future looking work and the work at hand. One of the core focuses that we're spending a lot of time on are policy development and that traffic and revenue study. The policy development is important because, again, that's going to lay the foundation of how the YoloTD corridor gets deployed. There are policy discussions that are ongoing at CARTA, which are at a regional level. Things like, what does the customer experience look like across the board? What regional consistency is going to be necessary when other corridors come on board? But the things that we're looking at specifically are those policies and those decisions that are necessary to implement the YoloTD corridor. There are specific things like, what are the business rules related to the time of day that tolling is going to commence with? What type of pricing are you going to do? Are you going to do something that's going to be reactive to the market? Or are you doing something a little bit more streamlined for time of day? Those are the decisions that we're looking at and putting in front of staff for guidance as far as, again, what's happening first with YOLO that can then be revisited on a regional level if necessary. Again, the TNR, the importance of the TNR is that's going to shape what we are looking at for those policies relating to toll rates to make sure that we're achieving traffic reliability, traffic time consistency, how we're meeting the federal mandates for 45 miles an hour for throughput. A lot of that study is being done at the TNR level, and the information gleaned from there will help inform pricing to help reach those goals that I just stated. We're looking at finishing the TNR, the first pass of the baseline modeling in April, with a fuller version of the full TNR done in the June-July timeframe. So at that point, that information can be presented to the board for consideration. Next slide. As I stated, one of the core functions that we're doing right now is that coordination with Caltrans. Caltrans has had a suspension of work with the contract that's been awarded. That's going to be lifting next month. So that construction is going to start on the corridor. Again, part of the work that we're doing is to make sure that the toll system that we're procuring, that will be collecting the money, is going to work within the constraints that we have within Caltrans. There are things that are trade-offs that we need to do because of the limitations we have on the causeway. So we need to make sure that technology can support that. There's things that we're looking at in the board packet that you saw for lane separation, which is a balance of safety, travel time reliability, and revenue. We're looking at all of those things in concert to make sure that it's the right balance of all of those items so that the toll program is successful. We're keenly aware that YoloTD as the first corridor sets the tone for CARTA and for the rest of the region. So we want to make sure that we're spending the time to get it right. Next slide. Again, one of the longest lead items that we have is the toll system RFP. This is a challenge that we have because the technology exploration that we do in concert with those business rules that I had just mentioned, combined with a procurement effort that's going to be led by CARTA. Our team at STC under the YOLO contract will write the technical request for proposals and will write the requirements for the system. But ultimately that RFP is going to be issued by CARTA, compliant with CARTA and SACOG's legal requirements for contracting, and for them to ultimately do the operations when the contract is awarded. So there's a lot of work that we need to do in the setup for the technical requirements, for the delivery, And then working in concert with Carter to make sure that this can be released to meet a total go live date of late 27, early 28. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It sounds like a lot of time, but when you think about the procurement process and technical development, it is quite a lift that we need to take, and the focus we're putting on now is going to yield dividends at the end. Next slide. So I threw a lot out at you. There's a lot of concurrent work streams. But what we have represented up here is kind of a breakdown of the areas of responsibility for what YoloTD is responsible for, what Caltrans is responsible for, what Carter and SafeCog are responsible for, what those joint responsibilities are, and then the overlap of what's Yolo and Carter, what's Carter and Caltrans, what's Yolo and Caltrans. There's a lot of overlap that we have. So in a nutshell, I'll try to sum this up for you. I'm happy to take questions. But Yolo's responsibility are those decisions specific to the county and the corridor. Carter's responsible for operational decisions, contractual decisions, and organizational decisions. Caltrans is responsible for the right-of-way, the construction, design, permitting. Caltrans and Carta are jointly working on the various agreements that need to be done within the right-of-way, and a coordination for the traffic management center, which will be monitoring traffic usage, the throughput on the corridor. Caltrans is running the traffic management center, but that's a joint agreement that Carta is going to do with them. Carta and Yolo, again, those equity touch points, first from the county level and then to the regional level, as well as the interoperability that needs to be done statewide. Again, Yolo sets the tone for the rest of the region, so we want to make sure that everything is deployed correctly with the larger interoperability that occurs with the state to make sure that the fast track that is used in Southern California is used here, that the customer experience is consistent across the board. Yolo and Caltrans are jointly working together for those touch points related to the toll system itself, that technology, the hardware deployed out in the field, the construction that's being done. And everyone is responsible for those regional policies, the scheduling and ongoing coordination, as Yolo is the first one out again, and as Carta stands up as a full organization. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That was a lot.
You guys get all that? No.
It's a bit overwhelming. And I appreciate the information that you shared with us. Clarifying questions or just informational questions?
But again, the purpose of this, it's a lot of information, but we do want to kind of bring you up to speed as to sort of, some of the key elements of the project and the level of coordination that's required to the board. There's no action that we're requesting from the board. Again, this is just an update. But, take the time to, free time to, look through the slides again and just, try to digest as much as you can, because it's hard for us to keep track of it. Fortunately, we have, good consulting team. We have good partnerships with Caltrans District 3, with SACOG, with Carta. So we are all coordinating, very closely on a regular basis. So the project is moving forward, as it should. And we just wanted to share with you what, some of the key elements are that we're dealing with right now.
I have a question on slide 3, Ellie. Or task grid, sorry, task grid. You were talking about Caltrans, and it says the RFP being developed to procure toll system equipment that meets YoloTD's needs, but Caltrans is the one designing it. I wasn't clear on that.
Sure, I'll explain the separation of those responsibilities. So the toll system, you can think about it in two groups. The first is the structures and the physical infrastructure, the power, the communications, the overhead gantries, the signage. All of that physical infrastructure has been designed by Caltrans. So that's, as all of this is on Caltrans right of way, they've got that responsibility to make sure that all of that physical infrastructure is designed and installed properly according to Caltrans and state standards. The work on the RFP, the second part of that is the toll hardware. the individual components that are collecting the tolls, the readers, the antennas, the transponders, all of that material is going to be included in this request for proposal. So the hardware that we procure, the request for proposal gets installed on the structures and facility that Caltrans is designing and installing.
Thank you. I have another one. On task 7. I circled this, but I don't remember the whole question, but can you speak to evaluation needed on how to best scale up the current PDM program? I'm not sure I was clear on what that was.
Sure.
Before you jump in, I just want sorry, Madam Chair, I thought it would be helpful for some of our newer board members to just hear what is our TDM program, what is Yolo commute? And then what does it mean that we're scaling it up? So I was gonna have Brian do that before we get into more details.
I think that answers pretty much everything. I wasn't sure how to ask it.
Yeah, so
So long.
YOLO Commute is a nonprofit that YoloTD manages and staffs. It's a membership-based transportation demand management program that most large employers and almost all the public sector employers are members of. So they pay a fee, and in return, they have access to the incentives and programs that are offered by YOLO Commute in order to reduce single occupant vehicle driving, primarily for commute trips, but really we're trying to, influence behavior for all of the trips. City of Winters isn't a member, but like Yolo County is a member, UC Davis is a member, City of Woodland is a member, we're a member, everybody's a member, almost. And so, but YOLO Commute operates on a shoestring budget, really small amount of funding. The amount of funding that's coming into Yolo County from the Yolo 80 Managed Lanes project is orders of magnitude greater. And so what the organizational study is going to do is, so that's going to open up transportation demand management for everybody in the county to be eligible for, and not just members of YOLO Commute. So YOLO Commute might not exist in the future, or it might be subsumed by YoloTD. It could scale up and continue to be a nonprofit. It could be, we don't know. That's the purpose of the organizational studies, to find out what type of organization is needed in order to implement the VMT mitigation measures from the Yolo 80 managed lanes, while also continuing to provide the incentives and programs that it does currently. So that's the purpose. I hope that helps answer the question.
I think so. It was a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Question. Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for the overview. Appreciate the updates, and this is exactly what we've been hearing, that apparently not hearing enough about. So we're having an update this evening. So that's great. Really appreciate that. I understand the sort of issue around the timing of the infra grant, and that sort of design is completed without a toll system vendor. That was on slide 38. So, and the sort of the core focus area under the corridor construction. I think the question is, what is and I assume it's either stipulations of sort of maybe not federal dollars, but the state dollars that were received sort of subsequent to the infra grant, or sort of stipulations due to the formation of CARTA. But what is the sort of hook, we'll say, around guaranteeing that there will be a toll system vendor, right? Like one of the there's gotta be some requirements, I assume, that this still be a toll, a managed lanes project, and not just only an additional lane in each direction, right? That was one of the things we've heard many times again and again, is that there's potentially a bait and switch here or coming, or that we may see it end up just being a sort of extra additional lane with no sort of potential revenue and stuff. So I'm just curious what requirements exist around making sure that there still will be a toll system vendor sort of process and selection and such. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So by way of background, right, so Caltrans is the owner operator of the system, but we, as the recipient of that $86 million federal infra grant, and a co-applicant for the $103 million state grant that we got, we have an agreement with Caltrans. Essentially says that this is the project that we're building. It is a toll lane, and if any modifications to the design of that would require YoloTD's approval as well. So, so yes, we are playing catch up very much so, but we are, I think we feel comfortable that we have our legal hooks to make sure that we don't backslide on that issue.
Yeah, thanks, appreciate it, thank you very much. And then the second question is just around the issue of the, is CARTA making decisions regarding the types of separation, like leaving lane separation and from express lane, managed lanes, like who's making those decisions? The Caltrans, CARTA board, what's, I saw that obviously the sort of full presentation of the CARTA board, and there were a variety of things around like, proposed like sort of, configuration, lane widths, the sort of set types of separation, hard, soft, you name it. So I'm curious about that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so that actually falls squarely into that category of its design issue. So Caltrans ultimately has the final say, but we as, because of our legal agreement, have the ability to influence and help shape that decision, if you will. So I think that's where we are. CARTA does not actually have a say in that decision, but because they are going to be the one who are collecting tolls and operating tolls, it has huge implications for them, which is why the CARTA board is also talking about it. This is very much that Venn diagram is so important, because all of the decisions that are being made by CARTA or Caltrans, they all are going to affect ultimately the success of this future transit network and this toll lane. And it's why it's so important that we're all working together and coordinating, because ultimately if one partner drops a ball, then there's so much that needs to happen in such a short amount of time. We all have a lot of work to do in concert very quickly to pull this off, but it's such a great team. And I have to say that the partnership has been, phenomenal amongst all three agencies, as far as just really bringing solution-oriented thinking to the table and trying to solve problems so that we can be successful.
Thanks so much, appreciate that, thank you.
It's always best when you're trying to do a project to have people with enthusiasm and curiosity, not people who close doors. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Two simple questions. If one were to want to add to their calendar date when they might drive on these things, what date would that be?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I think we're talking 27, late 27, 28. Sorry,
28.
Greg Wong,
Greg Wong.
District 3, project management for the record. So yeah, I think substantial completion is late 27, but when you talk about construction complete fully with all the paperwork, I think we're talking 28, but substantial, we'd like to say substantial completion because that's when people get a drive on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're a couple of years out.
So 2028. Ish.
Yeah. We've known to be faster, but sometimes slower. It really depends on a lot of other factors. But as Autumn says, they've been a great team. We're looking at all kinds of options, Director Ferricks on the lane divisions, and obviously we're constrained by space, but team is doing a great job.
Thank you, appreciate that, yeah.
Thank you.
And the second question is, well, one, I appreciate the update and all of the different, the outline of all the different tasks. If somebody, or perhaps one of us remember, or the public would like to follow this along, is there anywhere online that these updates, even at a high level, can be accessed?
If you have a project web page, and I do upload all of the staff reports and slides to that page as well, and we can make sure that we have updated relevant information in there as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I will say Caltrans is also providing construction updates. So like there's an upcoming closure, for example, this weekend I'll just say it into the record for anyone who doesn't know, that the 8050 eastbound is it Enterprise Boulevard? You want to announce it?
Yeah,
Right?
so that's the rehab project, which is separate from the managed lanes project. So we do have a closure this weekend. I really wish it was last weekend because I'm going to the Bay Area this weekend. So I guess that's karma, but yeah, it's this weekend from Enterprise to past Jefferson before it. So yeah, stay home. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. If there aren't any other questions, I would open up for public comment. Do we have public comment tonight? I bet might have something to say.
Hi, my favorite project.
Hi, Alan.
Hello, some issues put on the list. The moral hazard, because we're giving 3 free, on the lane. And the savings will be quite significant on congestion to the Tahoe traffic, things. There's no way to enforce whether there's 3 in a car. There's no way to identify that, so that's a significant problem. I think Autumn said that on the radio when she was interviewed about this. You were with her, Lucas, back in December 25th, 2023. I remember all these things. So there's no way of monitoring whether someone's 3 free. So they can they claim 3 free, throw the switch, and no one can check it. There's no turnoffs for ships to stop people for doing that. I know there's money for, in the environmental impact statement, there's specific commitments for quantities of BMT mitigation. So we need to basically make sure that has first tabs in the money, and the revenue projections from, I saw Carter early, fall grossly short of the amount of money promised in the environmental impact report to fund the BMT mitigation. That will be an ongoing issue. I don't know what's going to happen with the lawsuit. I'm not following that, but that's a good issue. And the third is, I know this board is very concerned about equity. 90% of the people who will be paying toll on this segment, 90% of the people who ride this causeway do not live in Yolo County. So if you take the tolls from those people who would not live in Yolo County and give it to mitigation efforts, Beeline, fixed route transits in Yolo County, that's a transfer payment. That's not equity. You're not basically mitigating the poor people who are basically affecting, who are driving on the freeway, and you're giving to other poor people. That's a transfer payment. That's really not equity. Then that's an issue for the entire region. So I think you need to address that. I think these are really important issues, and I'm due to disappointment that the notification about the closure of the 50 was so short and changed as quickly. I don't think that's very considerate, especially when the Tower Bridge will also be closed this coming weekend, and a weekday will be affected. I don't know who decided this. They were Caltrans consulted with you or our local people, but I don't think that's very considerate. And I'm still waiting for an estimate of what the toll revenue that people are going to pay. There have been some estimates. Autumn Burson, I think this is quote, the correct quote, said that basically, quote, similar toll lanes in the Bay Area, peak hour tolls are $1 a mile. I think that's about what she said. Maybe she can correct it, but I think we should know there should be a public statement about how, some estimate of how much the tolls are going to be in peak hour. I think people should know. That's reasonable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Would anybody like to respond to any of the questions before we continue public comment?
I will just note that the traffic and revenue study, that is the mechanism by which we'll have a better understanding of what pricing the corridor and would generate based on demand. Ultimately, the toll prices are going to be set by CARTA. It's not like they've been set and we're hiding that information. That information, that decision needs to be based on a lot of analysis. And a lot of the work that you're hearing about tonight is foundational for making a determination on what the appropriate toll price would be.
All right, I would go back to the public comment. Is there any other public comment coming up? We have Alex Benavides.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll just make a small comment, because I'm sure this will probably be brought up after this plan is implemented. Maybe an emphasis on bike lanes in general. I know there's one goes along Causeway that's somewhat popular, but I think with all this kind of on the road, you could get a lot of feedback or a request for like maybe a reinforced bike lane, make sure everyone can still have a healthy, safe alternative. They don't feel like using the road at all.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the bike lane, or is that?
The existing bike
available?
lane will be preserved, and there'll be some improvements, some capital improvements done on each end of the causeway to make the transition from the causeway on the surface streets safer and more comfortable.
Thank you. Are there any online comments or anything that was submitted that I didn't see? And no public comments online, only our written comment that I received. Do we have more questions? No?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple questions. I noticed the contract started October of last year. Does it run through this timeline, January 2026, or go beyond that to completion date? And then the second question is related to just the community outreach and engagement task, which I know you said goes throughout all of the tasks in the time period. So it's sort of related, wondering when the really ramps up in different periods. I understand what phase in and out with the different tasks. So just curious for that, and if that appears on the website for public information.
I'll take the first one and then take the second. So, yeah, we made sure that, this contract, we set the contract expiration for, I think, 2 years after we expected the lanes to open, just to make sure that if there's loose end, if there's, you know, something that needed to be done retroactively that we needed to respond to operationally, that we didn't have to go and extend the agreement to do that.
To your question about the work that's being done for the community outreach. As you said, that is an ebb and flow. So one of the examples that I can give about part of the ebb is the work that's being done right now for the TDM outreach, the stakeholder engagement that utilize not just the core team that's doing that work for the TDM, but the communications team to make sure that we're including the right set of people, that our questions are formulated in the right way, that the surveys that were being put out there are going to be impactful. Same thing as well with the equity studies. So making sure that we're looking at not just the communities of concern, but the most effective ways to reach them, to make sure that, again, we're engaging the right stakeholders, to make sure that people are being informed and have an opportunity to speak. So those are two examples within the current workflow that the equity team, that the communications team is supporting. In addition, there was a good question about, you know, the information that's going out there for construction updates and things like that. One of the tasks that the communications team can support, and one of the things that we've done was to set up an initial call tree. So to identify those people from Caltrans, from ARDA, and from Yolo, would be on tap if there's an issue that comes up, so that the communications effort is consistent and informed amongst all parties. To the website, if there are updates that are necessary on the website as the project progresses, that team is also available to support the YoloTD team for that, working in concert with Caltrans and with SACOG and ARDA to make sure that all messaging is consistent across the board.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up, Director Vegas, one of the questions about the project webpage. Is there a place on their project webpage, or can there be a place on the project webpage that specifically talks about bike lanes? And what we're doing for bike lanes. It's just a lot easier working with the public when they know what's happening than when they don't. And so I would just like to keep the bike riders informed.
Yeah, I'll take a look at what's on there now and strengthen it if it seems like there's any ambiguity as to what the intent is for the bicycle facility along the corridor.
Thank you. Anything else? Jeff, that was a lot of information. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it, Brian. I appreciate all the work, and I look forward to the next update. When is the next update?
So I think we were talking about doing them quarterly. And as Jeff mentioned, I think we're going to have a work product in the form of the traffic and revenue report, probably around, so that would be about July. It sounds like that's around the time that will be complete. So that might be a good hook for our next update.
Thank you. That's really important. With the Yolo 80 managed lanes project update finished or completed for today, it's time for the administrative reports. And I was wondering if the board members have any reports tonight. All right, I don't have anything new. Would you like to make all right, Transdev report?
Sure, I'll go. I'm Julie. I am the operations manager. I'm also serving as acting GM. So just a couple things. So last week we had our we did like employee of the week. So we kind of did something every day. So that went really well. Really good engagement there, which was great. And then to jump on what Daisy was saying, to prepare for our new bid, which is next month, the end of April. Our driver recruitment still ongoing. We currently have 92 operators, including 9 in training. So during the process of graduating, we had a class start today of 3. So we're gonna be having class at least twice a month until we get to April. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
Appreciate it,
welcome.
Joy. Do you want to do the long range calendar before you report?
Sure, either way, or I can just do them together if you like.
Do them together, please.
All right, Janine, would you pull up the long range calendar? Thank you. My computer, of course, just died, so I'm now reading off my phone. So, Phil, long range calendar, I cannot read that, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up here. So for our next board meeting, is our first of our series of special budget workshops. So we are busy putting that together for you. We have some great speakers coming to talk to you about state and federal formula funding for transit. So we're looking forward to that. We will have some consent calendar items, but that will be the sole focus in terms of substantive discussion for that meeting. And then in May, May is always an exciting time for us because that's when we do our budget. So we'll be bringing you our draft budget preliminary discussion after we've had a chance to talk to your technical advisory committee, which is, comprised of the cities and other agency staff, as well as the citizens advisory committee. Then we'll be bringing that to you. We'll also be bringing the audited financial statements at that time for the last fiscal year. As well, the Fourth and Hope Grand Jury Report findings. So that was something that was originally agendized for tonight. Some of our partners in that work asked us for a bit more time to continue working on reviewing and sharing their feedback. So we pushed that. And of course, since we don't have a regular board meeting in April, we had to push that to May. But we're looking forward to that discussion. And then on the short range transit plan, we'll be sharing the existing conditions analysis that has been done to sort of tee up then subsequent conversation about, where we want to go with this short range transit plan. We've got a special meeting in May. We promised not to do this to you very much, but it was your direction back to us that we wanted to have at least to have 2 budget workshops prior to adoption of the new budget. So that's May 27th, special meeting will be focused on looking at how YoloTD allocates our costs among different funding sources. So that'll be a kind of a very in-depth looking internally at YoloTD's budgeting process and cost allocation process. That'll be the focus of that workshop. And then in June, we'll be asking for your approval of the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. And then also bringing you a pretty substantive update on YATSE, our Active Transportation Corridors project. So a lot of exciting stuff in the long range calendar. And then in terms of my executive director's report, just to share a few other updates, pardon me while I stop taking pictures of my fingers and get to the right page. Here we go. So Major League Baseball season is getting underway at the end of this month and we are ready. You can visit yolobus.com/baseball for detailed information on how to take YoloBus to Sutter Health Park, including information on transferring from SAC-RT Light Rail. We're coordinating with our partners at SAC-RT as well as Capital Corridor, JPA, and NorCal Go, which is our kind of regional transportation demand management program. So that's all happening and we're very excited to see how that goes. We're working right now on a cycle 2 funding request for SB 125. This is the state funding that was provided by the state to help soften the fiscal cliff when the COVID funding ran out. So we're making that request to SACOG for $15 million, about half of which will be to support near-term operations and capital costs, really just to keep our fleet running and keep our buses running for a few more years. And then about $8 million for purchasing battery electric buses and our zero emission infrastructure, consistent with our statewide mandate to transition to a zero emission fleet. So we're excited for that. Last week, we participated in 2 meetings related to the Yolo Donnelly redevelopment project here in Woodland. There was a public workshop on the ASIC application, which we were a partner on. And there was also a kickoff meeting for the Choice Neighborhood Partners program. It's a federal HUD program that the Yolo County Housing Authority has won, and it looks at really what are some improvements that can improve the quality of life for residents of Yolo Donnelly, as well as the overall surrounding neighborhood. So we're excited to partner with them on that. This Friday, March 18th, is Transit Employee Appreciation Day. So I just want to take this moment to recognize all of our wonderful team, both in YoloTD staff, as well as our awesome partners at TransDev. We're so grateful for all of them. And we're looking forward to celebrating that with them. And then lastly, as some of you may recall, we had some issues with a leaking roof last year, and we had to rebuild this wall, and there's still some like torn wallpaper. And in case you were wondering, we haven't forgotten. We're working with Yolo County, Ryan Pistakini's office to roll out the final repairs, repainting, fixing the carpet, a few other things. It looks like they're going to be able to project manage that for us starting in the next fiscal year. So we're hoping to get that work underway this summer. And that concludes my report.
We're busy.
Yes, we are.
I think I will take public comment on the last 4 items.
The Davis Enterprise reported that a knife was pulled on someone on a bus. I'm surprised we should be information about safety on the bus. There was an article in the Davis Enterprise. I'm surprised there wasn't a report about that security. Certainly it's a concern. Making transit safe is really important, just like getting the trust, that sort of thing. Second, I'm wondering whether Trump's election will affect our agency in terms of funding, and also TransDev is owned by a French company, French banks. I don't know what that'll impact. So I think it might be interesting to know what's on the horizon in terms of transit funding and that relationship. And I know that I applaud the extra time on budget and whatnot. I think before the budget comes out, you should preview the benchmarks and the metrics and the cost effectiveness numbers, see what they're proposing, and get that before you present the actual calculations. What's the most useful number before we actually use the ratios, before you actually look at the actual budget. I think that might be helpful. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Before we adjourn, I'd like to thank everybody that works for Yolo Transportation District and all the people who presented tonight. And we will adjourn this meeting at, I can't read it from here. Does it say 8:09? Yeah. Okay. At 8:09, and we will meet again.
We will meet again on Monday, April 14th at 6 p.m.
All right, see you Monday, April 14th, same that time, same that channel.